Okay.
All right, I think we've got everybody in now, so I will go ahead and get started. First, I want to welcome everyone to our first ever Runaway Wednesday. Not just the first of 2022, this is our first ever. This is kind of a play on our Moving to Mexico Monday series, which some of you are familiar with. We used to run it in person, then we did it online during COVID and last year. But Monday was a troublesome day, and so we decided to give it a new name and a new night, and so I'm excited about this this program. I wanted to introduce myself for those of you who I don't know. I see some new names out there. Let me just let these people in. I am Kim Temple, and I am the owner of Runaway Realty, along with my husband and partner, Gabriel Ortega, who's not here tonight. He's just gotten over a bad bout of COVID. Well, we both are, but he was much sicker, and so he's not able to join us. Hopefully he'll be here in the next, probably not next time either, honestly, it'll probably be March. But we also have some other members of our team here tonight. Keith Smith, who is an agent who's joined our team. We're so pleased to have him. And Laura Perez, who is the Wonder Woman, and I don't even know what title to give her, but she's saving our asses at the office. And I wanted to introduce, we have some friendly local faces here. Well, one of them, oh, there's Donna. Caroline Gallegos, who is a dear friend and has been my wingman since day one with these Moving to Mexico Monday, well, everything really. And so I so appreciate you taking your time out to join us, Caroline. She's really a wealth of information and has lived here a long time, about 10 years. And also Donna Sircu, who's trying to join us on her iPad. I don't know if she can see us. Donna's also lived here quite some time, has rented Portside, rented in the Colonia, bought land and built, and bought a house that was already built. So she also has a ton of information for those of you looking at doing different projects here. And so I really appreciate them giving us their time tonight to answer questions. And I think that's it for local folks at this point. Just really quick background, because there are some new people there. Our goal with these meetings is to, let you meet someone in person, talk to some people who really live here and have actually gone through the process of buying, not the guy at the bar who knows everything but has probably never bought anything. We want to give you some good, solid information upon which to base your decisions and move forward with your dream. And we won't cover everything on every meeting, but we want to give you a good basis on every meeting so you'll have information that you can use going forward. And we want to have fun. Normally, it's a kind of a virtual cocktail party, and I'm usually having wine or a cocktail, but coming off of COVID, I have an iced coffee. Maybe next time. But I invite you to enjoy and relax and bring your questions. We are recording this meeting, so if you are not comfortable with that, I should say we're recording it and we're going to post it on YouTube. So if you're not comfortable with that, feel free to turn off your camera. I think that's it. Please make sure you use the chat box. I see maybe there are some chats here. Yeah. Use the chat box there if you have some questions. I have to be honest, if I'm talking, I sometimes don't see that. If someone else could notify me that there's something down there, I'll pay attention. So I hear there's some Canadians here. Anyone else, any Americans here? Is this an all Canadian crowd tonight? Oh, hi, Eric and Jen. Hello. You're in the freezing northeast, right? With the northeaster, yeah. Okay. Great, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, Southern Utah, woohoo. Did you guys get snow? Colorado got a big snowstorm. Okay, I feel it was weird to talk when no one has their thing on. Oh, it's snowing a little bit right now. All right, well, welcome guys. So tonight we're just gonna kind of do a quick introductory session. We're gonna talk a little bit about how foreigners can buy and own property here. Hold on, I've got some people in the waiting room. And we'll do, some Q&A along the way. We don't have a huge group, which is nice, so we can have some chit chat. And I wanted to let you know that our next meeting will be the 16th. And we're going to be joined, I'm excited for this one. We're going to be joined by immigration expert Millie Arceo. And she's going to talk to us about all the changes that have taken place in the immigration system this year, which is important to most people thinking about relocating to Mexico, either full or part-time. So make sure you sign up for that class and plan on joining us on the 16th, February 16th, which is a week and a half from today. Okay, one person we got to let in. Okay, welcome newcomers. All right, we have a nice big group here tonight. And there's more, hold on. Okay. So I just want to start out by just asking you all, really, it may seem like a silly question, but raise your hand if you've heard that foreigners cannot own property in Mexico. Because I hear it every day. People still contact me and say, you can't own property in Mexico. It's a lease, you really own it. The government can take it at any time. So we hear that from buyers even now every day. And it's so kind of sad. I mean, there is some basis in the question, and I'll give you that historical background and kind of talk about how this perception that foreigners couldn't own property got started. But the good news is, yes, foreigners can own property in Mexico, and it's very safe and it's a good investment if you do the bare minimum to protect yourself. Don't get margarita fever and make some crazy decisions. And you are obviously not going to do that because you're here tonight to get the real information. So yay, you will not be the ones complaining of having margarita fever, which is not a hangover. It's the phenomenon of people coming to Mexico and kind of checking their common sense at the border and making decisions about buying real estate and not investigating how it works and, doing some due diligence and protecting themselves and getting themselves a professional agent and a legal team to close the transaction. So, wow, we have some late people. Hold on. Trying to get them in. Can you guys hear those doorbells, or is it just me? Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So yes, foreigners can own property in Mexico. The Mexican Constitution actually prohibits foreign ownership along its borders, 50 kilometers from a sea border and 100 kilometers from a land border. So obviously Puerto Morelos and really all of the Riviera Maya is within the restricted zone in Mexico. In this zone, the Constitution has established that foreigners cannot own property. However, in the 1970s, the government, wishing to encourage foreign investment, but not wishing to change the Constitution, created a vehicle to allow for foreign ownership in the restricted zone. And that vehicle is an asset trust called a fideicomiso. It's a weird long word that looks very strange in writing, but it's pretty easy, fideicomiso. And this asset trust allows foreigners to own property in this zone, in the trust, with a Mexican bank as the trustee. The Mexican bank that serves as a trustee is one of very few who've been given this ability to be asset trustees, basically, by the government. And this bank that is going to be holding the trust or administering the trust for you, you'll be the primary beneficiaries and the bank will be the trust manager. That bank is not at all like a mortgage bank. So this bank has only administrative purposes. They can't enter the property. They can't make any changes to the property. They can't loan against the property. They can't borrow against the property. They cannot affect your ownership of the property in any way. Their role is to provide you this vehicle to own the property yourself. So unlike a mortgage lender who can affect your ownership and enjoyment of your property and can loan against it, borrow against it, and evict you from it, the trustee cannot do any of those things. What they do is send you a bill once a year. That's basically their involvement in your property. You will be involved with them when you buy the property, in that if you buy a property from another foreigner, you're probably going to transfer their trust to you. If you buy it from a Mexican person, they're going to have to put it into the trust for you. You're going to pay them every year that you own it. It's about $500 a year, US dollars right now. And then when you sell it, your buyer is going to either take the trust, or if you sell it to a Mexican person who doesn't need a trust, they will extinguish the trust and you will pay for that as well. So the trust sounds scary, but the reality is it's like a legal fiction created to get around this constitutional prohibition. People don't like it because it doesn't feel, it's not how we're used to owning things, unless you're, unless you have trust in the US, which many people do. But it really doesn't affect your ownership in any way that is important to you. No one can take it from you. No one's telling you what to do. No one's putting your ownership at risk. The trust is time limited, because just to have a legal trust, it has to be time limited. It's 50 years. And it's automatically renewable unless you've been convicted of a federal crime involving the property, in which case you probably forfeited it already. So there's no risk that someone's going to just extinguish your trust and you won't own your property anymore. Do you have any questions about the trust? Because I know this is something that really can really concern people. Anyone? You have to turn on your audio. No questions about the trust?
I can say something about having a fideicomiso real quick.
Okay.
Having owned homes in the United States and then moved here and bought a house in Mexico, the experience and the feel of owning your home here in Mexico is exactly the same as it was in the United States. The fact that the title is held in a trust by a Mexican bank, it has no impact or influence on your daily enjoyment of the property. And honestly, you never even think about the fact that it's held in a trust until it comes time to pay them their annual maintenance fee. And you pay them annual maintenance fee, and then it's out of your mind again for another 12 months. It feels exactly like owning a home in Canada or the United States. There's no difference.
So we're in the process of buying a property in Puerto Morelos, and it's currently owned by a couple of Albertans. So there is clearly a fideicomiso already on that property. Do we inherit that one? Does the fact that they have it convey any benefit to us as we become the owners? Or is it as if there never had been fideicomiso on that place before?
Daniel, they're going to...
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, Daniel, they're going to use the existing trust that the owners already have. It's going to be transferred into your name.
Okay.
Financially, there's not really any sort of benefit to having the fideicomiso transferred instead of a new fideicomiso established. It costs about the same. Banks in Mexico are just like banks in every other country in the world. They're going to get their money. They have their fees, and they want to get paid. So whether you establish a new fideicomiso in order to purchase or transfer an existing fideicomiso from the existing owners, it still costs about the same. And the process to accomplish this takes about the same amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Hi.
So, hi there. Bill's got to mute his phone. If the fideicomiso is taken over, then is it 50 years from that time frame, or is it 50 years from the onset, or when the fideicomiso was initially set up?
It's 50 years from when it was originally put into a fideicomiso. So if you're buying from another foreigner, your trust is for the remainder of the time left. I haven't had really any situations where we're getting close to the end of the trust period. If we were, that might be a reason to just say, let's extinguish that trust and start a new one. It all costs about the same. You're either going to renew the one, if you get to the end of the trust period while you still own it and you want to renew it, you can renew it, or we can extinguish the old one when you buy and open a new one.
Okay.
The reason we don't, I mean, it is much faster to transfer the trust than to extinguish and start a new one. So usually it's better and it's more interesting to people to get that done quickly, to do the transfer. The one hiccup that we're having right now is that when for like the last 20 years, Scotiabank was one of the named banks that could be administrators of trusts, and especially a lot of Canadians chose to have their trust at Scotiabank because it's a Canadian bank. They've decided they're not doing trusts anymore. So if you have a trust with Scotiabank and you're selling your property, every one of those sellers now has to pay, which I think is a little unfair, pay Scotiabank to extinguish the trust, and their buyer has to get a new trust. So there's two charges. There's a charge to the seller and a charge to the buyer. Seller extinguishes, buyer starts the new one. So we have a lot, especially in Puerto Morelos, we have a lot of properties sitting with Scotiabank trusts that are going to have to be taken care of. In my mind, what they should, if they're going to get out of the trust business, why don't they just move it like wholesale to another one? But nobody asked me.
That's usually what banks do, right?
Well, the bank's not going out of business, so but they're just not going to do trust. So I don't really get it. But anyway, if there's a Scotiabank trust, we have to get rid of that one and get a new one for the buyer. The other thing I want to point out is that the owning in a fideicomiso is in no way a lease. A lot of people seem to think that it's a lease. It's very different from a lease. When you lease a property, the owner retains all of their rights. They can enter the property, they can evict you from the property, they can, tear down your structure, they can mortgage your property. This isn't at all what that is happening with that. You don't have a lease. You have a property in an asset trust. So one of the benefits of that is that, when you own in a foreign country, there's always this fear that what happens when you pass away, what's going to happen to my property. When you own in a trust, you already designated within the terms of the trust, within the terms of the legal structure, you've designated who your substitute beneficiaries will be. So typically, if it's a couple buying a property, they are primary beneficiaries. And if one passes away, it goes to the other primary beneficiary. And then if both people pass away, it goes to the substitute beneficiaries. And you can name one, or, I don't think there's a limit on the number of substitute beneficiaries you can name, but they will take it in equal parts. So you can set all that up, and so you can have the comfort of knowing if something happens to you, your heirs are not going to be fighting in a Mexican probate court trying to keep that asset in the family. You've already taken care of that by placing it into the trust and naming your substitute beneficiaries in the trust. And of course, you can change that if something happens over the course of your ownership and you need to change out the substitute beneficiaries. You can do that at any time as well. Of course, you have to pay. Everything involving the bank means you have to pay, but it can be done. Add this person. Okay, any questions about that? No? You can, a lot of people ask if they can, if they don't like the idea of the trust, they say, can't we just have a corporation? The answer to that is no. The Mexican government has been very clear that if you're going to own property for residential purposes, you need to own it in a fideicomiso if you're a foreigner in a restricted zone. If you have a corporation outside of Mexico and you want that corporation to be the owner, that's possible, but they'll be the beneficiary of the trust as well. They'll still be a trust. It will just be a corporation as beneficiary rather than individual people. And sometimes you might want to do that if you have multiple people going in on a property, because if you have a corporation outside of Mexico and you need to change the ownership out of that corporation outside of Mexico, maybe one couple wants to be bought out, you can do that outside the country and it's not going to trigger a change in the status here. We recently had a situation where two couples bought a property. One couple decided they needed to get their money out. The other couple had to buy them out, but it triggered a whole new transaction. So they had to go through the whole closing again and incur those closing costs again. So if you have a situation where a bunch of people are going in, sometimes you might want to consider creating a corporation outside of Mexico. I would always advise you to talk to your tax person wherever you live and also talk to an attorney here to see what the best way is for you, but that is something that you can consider doing. The only time you would really ever want to do a Mexican corporation is if you're buying a property, like a commercial property, you're going to run a business. In that case, it might be beneficial to have a Mexican corporation, but you would really want to talk to tax advisors in Mexico, the lawyer in Mexico and your tax advisor in the US to make sure that you're covering all your bases on a situation like that, because that can get a little bit more complicated. I mean, anytime you open a corporation in Mexico, it's like opening a giant can of worms because they pay taxes taxes are due every month here. So when you open a corporation, you're taking on the obligation to file taxes every month, which means you have to hire a Mexican accountant, and even if it's all zeros and nothing's happening. And then of course there's end of the year reporting requirements. It's just kind of a mess, and really it's not necessary. You've been given this very neat package of this asset trust that you can use. So just use that. Usually that's the best thing. There was a time when, well, it happened. It's actually my house is in a corporation because at a certain time period, the lawyers were telling, people, oh, you don't want to feed a commiso. It's such a mess. It's so expensive. And then you have to pay every year. Just open a corporation. Well, that's because when you open a corporation, the lawyer makes the money. When you open the fideicomiso, the bank makes the money. So it was very much within their interest to advise you to open a corporation, but they didn't explain to people what the consequences were, which is this ongoing filing requirement, and it's difficult to maintain a corporation. Anyway, so enough about that. Try to keep it in a fideicomiso if you can. That's the safest, most expedient way to own property here. Any questions on corporations? No? Okay. So when you are going to buy property in Mexico, you don't need any special visa status. You can be in Mexico on a tourist visa to buy property. You will, however, want to consider getting ideally permanent resident visa status before you sell property in Mexico, because you're going to need that to try to qualify for a partial exemption against the capital gains tax. So buying the property, you can do that on a tourist visa, no problem. By the time you sell, it's best right now under the current tax situation that you have permanent resident visa status before you sell. Now, our next meeting, we're going to talk to the immigration expert because a lot of stuff has happened to change in Mexico recently with respect to visas, and it's starting to seem that they're not letting people just come in and out on tourist visas if you own property here. They want you to have at least temporary resident visa status. And so it's causing issues with people not getting the full amount of, if they usually come 6 months a year, want to spend the high season here, easy peasy, they've been doing it for years. Now they're getting hassled a little when they're coming in because the government's trying to force you into getting a visa status. So that it doesn't change the fact that you don't need it to buy, but it is something, it kind of makes it more, I mean, if you want to spend time here, you're probably going to need at least temporary resident visa status. So it's something to think about as you're in the process of thinking about buying, but not a requirement before you buy. Any questions about that?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't have residency by the time you sell, then you pay a higher tax rate upon your sale. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then is there a time frame in which you have to own your home before you can sell it? I've heard 3 years. I don't know if that's an arbitrary number.
You can sell it any time, but if you want to take advantage of this partial exemption against capital gains, you need to have owned it for 3 years and have a permanent resident visa by the time you sell.
Okay.
So that's to qualify for that. But I mean, there are no limits on, you can buy property and sell it the next day here if you want to. There's no limit on that. You don't have to hold it for any period of time, but if you want to qualify for that exemption, you do.
Which of course is financial benefit to do so.
Yeah. It's a
Is
big
it significant, I assume?
It's huge, yeah. The partial exemption right now exempts, no, so Mexico has it's more of an income tax. It's a little bit hard to explain, and I have to be honest, I'm not a tax expert, but like the worst case scenario is 30% on the gain. They don't measure it the same way we do in the US. I don't know anyone paying 30% because, of course, as with everything, there are workarounds on this. But the partial exemption will, if you qualify for that, you can exempt up to what is the equivalent of around 200,000 US right now. So for many properties, that's a complete exemption. If you're selling a property under 200,000, you've probably got a complete exemption. So it is possible to completely exempt and not pay any taxes, depending on the price point of the property.
Thank you. That answers my
That makes
question.
sense? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Could you explain the temporary residence visa? Just more in terms of implications and process?
I'm gonna ask you to come back on the 16th for the immigration expert, but I can tell you in general what I know, which is that there are, income requirements, but getting a resident status in Mexico, either temporary or permanent, does not impact your citizenship in any other country. It doesn't impose a requirement on you to spend any amount of time in Mexico. It doesn't prohibit you from going in and out of Mexico. It's just a status when you're in Mexico. So it's not something that can negatively impact your life anywhere else by getting this status. But there are income requirements, and there's special programs where some people who have been living here without it have kind of amnesty right now to get in under these special programs. But I cannot tell you what the income requirements are. I can tell you in general, I know that you have to start the process outside of Mexico. You started at a consulate of your choosing. You will get approved outside of Mexico, and then you'll come into Mexico, and you have 30 days to initiate your process here, which used to actually take, for a couple of years, it was taking months. Now it's in many cases a one-day process. You get your appointment at the immigration office, you go in, they fingerprint you, they issue your permanent resident visa card, and you walk out with it. So that they've really streamlined that, which is great for people, because otherwise, when your visa is pending and you've entered Mexico, you're not supposed to leave until it's finished, or else you have to kind of start the process over again. So
is there a defined length of time for somebody to stay in Mexico under a temporary visa status?
Nope, no time limit in, no time limit out. It's not, okay. Yeah.
So
I just want to say there is a time limit on a visitor's visa, but not on a temporary resident. Yeah.
And right now it's pretty arbitrary time limit for what I'm hearing.
Indeed. Well done, Lee.
Which is why, a lot of people are now just going ahead and getting the temporary resident, especially if you own here, you don't want to be kept away from your property.
Right.
And so I'm interested to see what Millie says. I have my own theory about why they're doing this. And I do think that Mexico is wanting to throw a wider net over taxes, tax income, and collect the rental income. And I think the first step is to get people to have visas, then you can get tax ID numbers, and then you can pay taxes much easier here. That's just my theory. I don't know if that's actually true, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I've got a question. Oh, are we all done with the visa thing? Because I want to bounce back to the capital gains tax. I'm a little bit confused. You had said a property over $200,000. Is that over? Is that
selling?
Is that the actual? Is that the difference between what you purchased it for and what you sold it for? Like if you bought a property for $100,000 down there, you sold it for $300,000, there's your $200,000, or is it any property over $200,000? I don't quite understand what the actual exemption is. The difference between your purchase price and what you sell it for down the road, or the actual just lump sum what the property got sold for.
It's neither one of those things, because it's an income tax here. And so you're going to have some set-offs against your income because you purchased property. So they don't measure it like they do in the US. or I don't know how Canada measures their gains, but they have a process here to measure the gain. And so it's not based on the purchase price necessarily. They do look at the registered purchase price when you bought versus the purchase, the registered purchase price in pesos when you sell. And there's some calculation that they do there to calculate what they believe your taxable income is. And if you qualify for this exemption, you have an exemption against that taxable income. And it's hefty. It's up to what right now it's called 4 million UDs. I don't know how to explain all that, but just the equivalent is 200,000 US dollars. So, so it is possible that you bought a $500,000 property and you sell it for 625, you may be exempt, depending on what your expenses are and what the peso calculation is. It can be very tricky because they're recording all the prices in pesos. Most people are buying and selling in dollars, but what's recorded legally and what they're going to use to calculate your taxes is pesos. So if you buy today at an inflated, we're sitting at 21 pesos to the dollar, and you sell in 5 years and it's back down to the more historic levels of 15, 16 pesos to the dollar, then your gain is minimized, right? If you buy today at 20 pesos to the dollar and you sell in 5 years and it's up to 25 pesos, then your gain is hugely magnified because they're only looking at the pesos, not what you actually paid in dollars. So that's why I said, it's hard to ballpark this. Just trust me when I tell you it's worth your time and effort to get a permanent resident visa and before you sell.
Okay.
At some time before you sell.
Thanks.
Yeah. And also to tell you that Mexico is the country of workarounds. So I don't know anyone paying the actual amount of capital gains, even without the partial exemption. There are ways to significantly reduce your taxes, but it's more fun to pay no taxes if you can on your gain. And the other thing is also that you're not double taxed. So you'll have documentation showing what you paid in Mexico when you have to report the income on your Canadian or US taxes. Okay. So you do not need a special visa status in order to buy in Mexico, but you do need cash. This market is basically an all cash market. There's not actual cash. You're not carrying dollars in a suitcase. You'll be doing wire transfers, but there's no financing really available for foreigners in Mexico. And the financing that's available for Mexicans, there are some, mortgage loans. They're very expensive here. The interest rate's really high. So, basically there's no financing. So most people buying here are borrowing against other assets at home, taking money out of their retirement or investment funds and pulling the cash out that way. When you do find, it's not even really financing. Sometimes if there's a project in pre-construction, the developer will offer a discount and offer you the chance to make payments, but you're still going to pay all that off before you take possession. So it's not like you're financing and you get to live in it. They're financing you, but you don't get to buy it, don't get to get into your home until you've paid it off. And the reason for that is rooted in real estate law in Mexico, which gives people in possession of property, like it's 11/10 of the law here. Possession is king. And so it is very hard to get possession of a property once you've allowed someone to have it, especially under an agreement to buy. It's very hard under rental agreements as well, but that is a big part of why there's no financing available. It's just too risky for banks in Mexico and especially outside of Mexico to loan against an asset that they can't recover if you stop paying. It's very expensive and time consuming to litigate in Mexico. So banks just are not willing to do it. And for that reason, most private sellers will not offer financing either. Every once in a while, you'll find someone who's willing to do that with a very hefty, usually paying quite a bit up front and then a short term, maybe 5 years probably not much longer than that, a situation where they would let you take possession and pay it off, but they're taking a big risk if they do that. So it's not often done. So that's kind of the bad news, if you will, about buying here. It is a big chunk of cash that you are going to park and you're not able to borrow against it, right? Because there's no one doing loans against these properties. The good news is it's because it's an all cash market, it's a super stable market. We haven't, when the mortgage crisis happened in the US and Canada, the financial crisis, and everyone lost, if you had a home in Florida, you lost your shirt because your neighbors had to sell at way under market value and all that happened. As that was going on, our market was fine and all of our properties maintained their value. Nothing was moving because Americans and Canadians couldn't borrow at the rate that they used to be able to. So there was a slow kind of couple years, but we didn't lose value, which I think is really important when you're an investor here. So, and in fact, and now we've had, several crises, the bird flu, the financial breakdown, wars, and now we've had the pandemic. And it's been very interesting because when the pandemic happened, armchair real estate experts were all over Facebook saying, don't buy, just hold on, the market prices are going to come way down. And I was like, they're wrong. And I was right. Like, prices not only didn't come down, they greatly increased. The interest, that could be a function of many things, but they didn't come down because the sellers don't have pressure. They paid cash for their property. They don't have a mortgage that they're trying to pay. They can probably get rental income. In the depths of the shutdown, you probably weren't getting rental income, but that didn't last very long, at least here in Mexico. So most sellers were not feeling a big crunch. They were sad they couldn't be here and maybe weren't making as much rental income, but they had already paid for the property. So, and the carrying costs are quite low here. The cost that you pay to just maintain a property is almost, well, depending on the property, they're quite low. So we didn't see a bunch of panicked sellers, or really any panicked sellers, trying to dump their property because of this crisis. And maybe because of the nature of the crisis, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but we instead saw, we were already having a great high season and a good market in 2019, and then we had the shutdown, but then it just never stopped. Like, it really got very, very busy for the last year and a half, and prices have really gone up. So it's interesting. As a buyer, it's maybe no fun to hear that the prices have gone up, but it should also, make you feel good, because knowing that they really only go up. We haven't had a situation that has hit our market so bad that we've lost a bunch of value in the property. So it's interesting. And I have no explanation for why our market has been like on fire for a year and a half. It's been all of the Riviera Maya. And as you know, US and Canada has had the same thing for different, or maybe related reasons, I'm not sure. But it's been really interesting. So any questions about that, basically? The all cash requirement? No? Not a surprise to you guys? Okay. In addition to the all cash in Mexico, the buyer is responsible for paying the cost to transfer the title. And so you will have some closing costs. And those are, in general, I think, higher than what most foreigners are used to. They can range from around 6% to over 12% of the purchase price, depending on the price point. At the $300,000 level, those costs are around 8 to 9% of the purchase price. And as you get more expensive, at the $600,000 level, they're more like 6% of the purchase price. As you get up around $1 million, it falls out around 5 and 4. So it drops quite a bit. And then if you get to the lower price points, the closing costs are a much larger percentage of the purchase price, because some of them are just flat fees. So the cost of the fideicomiso is the same whether you're buying a $50,000 property or a $1 million property. Some of the registration fees remain the same. The purchase acquisition tax is, of course, pegged to your purchase price. And the notario fees and the legal fees are often pegged to the purchase price as well. So, so that is something to plan for as you're making your budget. You not only will need the cash for the, purchase price, you're going to need the closing costs as well. Any questions about that? You guys are so quiet. Okay. Let me look at my notes here.
Drinking as fast as I can, Kim.
All right, well, I gotta have some coffee.
I missed my fast window because I'm drinking with you guys.
I've got a question on that fee, on those fees. In Canada, you could write that off against your capital gain when you go to sell. Can you do that in Mexico? No.
No.
Okay.
No. You can, I mean, the real estate commission, is set off against your gain.
Mhm.
It's not dollar for dollar, but that does help you a little bit. But those other costs are not usually
So the
factored
fees, no.
in.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in terms of the actual buying process, it's pretty, well, the overview is pretty similar to what you're used to. You're going to do a written offer, a signed offer, that we'll often get a counter offer. We'll do some negotiations, come to an agreement on price and terms. And then everyone signs that agreement. Then we would get a closing cost quote, have an escrow agreement prepared. I'll do a note about escrow right here. We strongly recommend that you use an escrow service when you're buying property in Mexico. It's actually not a very common thing here because when sales happen between two Mexican citizens, they can happen very quickly. And so there's often this first payment to a seller, and then within a week or so you can close and do the second payment, and then everyone's happy. When a foreigner's involved, things slow down quite a bit. So you want to put some money up to show that you're serious about buying a property, but it's not a great idea to give money to a seller and then have them hold on and wait for another 2 to 3 months until we can pay the rest of it to close. You got to hope that they're going to be there. So the escrow account is really handy to hold the funds. It's a trust account. You hold it for the parties. They agree to hold the money there. The buyer can't withdraw it. The seller can't use it. It's for safe in the account. But it shows the good faith of the buyer that they actually have funds to complete the purchase. So we really recommend that you use an escrow service. We use Secure Title out of their offices in Playa del Carmen. And their escrow account is at Citibank in New York. We've been working with them for 8 years, I think now, and with no trouble. And so I really think that's the best way to purchase. You don't want to give money directly to a seller, especially as a foreigner. So we get the escrow agreement in place. After that happens, you'll send an earnest money deposit, which you would have negotiated in your offer. You send that to escrow, and you'll also send a deposit on the closing costs. And that deposit will allow the attorney to go ahead and do the due diligence on the property. They'll prepare the formal contract in English and Spanish. And that contract is the binding legal document. We don't have anything but a gentleman's agreement up to there. Once we get to the contract in English and Spanish and you've signed that, you have a binding legal document with the seller that you could litigate if you had to, and has penalties for bailing out of it. So once we've signed that, if the buyer says, hey, I changed my mind, you forfeited some amount of money, probably 10%. And if the seller fails to close, they've forfeited 10% as well. So that is the document that we want to kind of hurry through and get to the contract so everyone's feeling comfortable that they're protected. Once we get the contract, we'll embark on a long period of uncertainty where, I'm sorry to say that, where the lawyers will coordinate getting the fideicomiso transferred or set up a new one or have the property put into its first fideicomiso. They'll, continue with the due diligence. They will coordinate with the notario. There's several parties involved in a sale. So they will coordinate with all that. It's the municipal government, the federal government, the fideicomiso bank, the buyer and the seller, and the lawyer and the escrow agent. So there's a lot of moving parts. We'll circulate, paperwork to sign about the fideicomiso. And the fideicomiso is really the thing that takes the longest. There's a government permit that has to be issued, and they have a huge backlog. And so that's what's slowing us down this year. We used to be able to close in like 30 to 40 days. Now we're really looking at more like 2 to 3 months kind of minimum, all because of the trust. So as the process is moving along, we will of course be checking in with the lawyers all the time saying, can you help us set a closing? When do we think we're going to close? And as it becomes more clear, they'll be able to give us kind of a ballpark of when they think we'll close. It can be very frustrating for buyers to wait for this because it's not how you're used to doing it. In the US, you write a closing date in your offer. Like we can't do that. And it's even more frustrating because many times it involves several people needing to coordinate travel to get here on a date together to do the closing. So I'm sorry about that, but that is just something you have to kind of prepare yourself for if you're going to buy property here. There's just really no way to pin it down much in advance. But so during the time when we'll figure out a date that works for everybody to get here, and we'll put it on, it will not be, no one will arbitrarily set your closing date. You will be involved in that. And then we all come to Mexico. You have to be present at the closing table for your closing or have someone with your power of attorney present. As you can imagine, during COVID, we got very good at getting powers of attorney because many people couldn't travel and we wanted to go ahead and close. So that's all doable. And then we do a final walkthrough. The morning of closing, we go to closing and we meet at the title company office and we close the transaction.
Kim, Daniel's got a question. I'm sorry, real quick. He's asking 2 to 3 months from what part of the process? So you just said 2 to 3 months sort of minimum for the closing process. That would be from the time of the accepted offer, yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, unless there's a big delay in getting the earnest money to escrow, because really nothing is rolling until the earnest money gets to escrow, right? They're not going to work on the contract. They're not going to start any ball rolling until they've got the earnest money and closing costs deposit into escrow. All right. Any questions on the kind of closing process?
Kim, I have a question.
Yes.
Have you worked with Selva before? Selva
Yes.
Escondida? You haven't? Have
No.
you heard anything?
What are you asking about?
The process. Now, okay, now you got me worried.
No. It's Selva Escondida, they hired their own sales team. They asked us to represent the product, but they were offering really not a good commission. So we said no.
Oh.
So they don't really work with a lot of outside agents because of that.
They kind of, from what we're understanding is they kind of have their own teams in place.
Yes. Yeah.
Anybody else here buying an Escondida? Anybody?
But it'll be the same process. I mean, all of them are, right? Except you probably have payments.
Yeah, we have payments and then our closing will be late April.
Yeah.
When it's completed.
Yeah.
Being built.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So who all lives in Mexico now? Any of you guys?
Us.
Just 3? Oh, okay. We don't yet either.
Yeah.
We're excited though.
Yeah, I mean, they built a lot of properties. I think you'll be fine. It seems like they're established developers. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in phase 3, so we're pretty stoked about that.
Oh, congratulations. That'll be fun.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Okay, well, that was my question. Do you have any questions? We're good.
So in terms of, anyone else have questions kind of about the buying process? I feel like I've been talking really fast and I want to give you guys a chance to ask about anything, actually. You got Caroline here, you got Don. Did we have Donna or did she go off? Donna left us. We have Caroline. Caroline's the subject matter expert about living in Puerto Morelos, moving to Puerto Morelos. We'll cover some of that in our later meetings, but tonight we're all yours. If you have some questions. Come on, nobody?
Okay, I got one.
Okay, good.
So you're under orange right now. What does that entail for living in Puerto Morelos?
There's really not much of a change. They kind of softened the color changed, but they kind of softened it, so it's really more like yellow. But all the restaurants are open at a smaller, lower capacity. We've always had a masking requirement. We've always had the wash your hands and take your temperature when you go into any business. So that hasn't changed throughout the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, I think, there was a big surge here, as there have been in the US and Canada. We're kind of typically about a month or two behind when you all see your surge, and then everyone travels here and then we get it. So I've heard the numbers are getting better, but I haven't seen any statistical proof of that. But in general, the restaurants are open. They're still having some events. The beach is open. I don't know, Keith and Caroline, how do you feel about orange?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when you quickly went through that we have a mask requirement, a lot of places in the US and Canada don't have mask requirements anymore. We never dropped our mask requirement. So we've been wearing a mask for 2 years here. Anytime you go indoor, it's very second nature to us now, though. I mean, it's not a big deal. So you wear the mask when you go into the establishment, when you sit down to eat. Obviously at a restaurant, you need to take it off to dine. But that's just the way it is. And at our grocery stores and most restaurants, they'll have a foot pad that you walk over that has some kind of very unknown anti-germ foot cleaning thing. And then, and then they have a gel dispenser right there. I mean, this is very, very common. This is the way we are living now and have been for a couple of years. So it shouldn't be shocking to you guys when you come and you see those things. It's very normal for us. And she went over it really quickly, but I know that might be, it seems very 2020, but that's the way it is here, and we're still that way. And
yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah,
because I live here, so I've always had the mask requirement. So
right, but I think that's surprising maybe for some of the folks on the call, but it's not a big deal. It's just the way we live.
I just want to make it clear that in Canada, we have mask requirements. That's absolutely incorrect for you to say that. In Canada, we have mask requirements. We have very strict requirements, unlike the US.
Oh, there you go then. Yeah, then the Canadians are familiar.
We just got back from Puerto Morelos, and one of the things that really impressed us compared to Canada, which I agree, everywhere here seems to have masking requirements, but down there, people wore their masks. Like, at least the Mexicans seem to have an idea of how to wear a mask. They weren't walking around with it, covering their beard or just covering their mouth. And we were impressed that even when they were outside walking, most of the people that appeared to be Mexican citizens would wear their masks. We felt safer down there, frankly, than we did up here in Canada, where people wander around in the stores and their mask is dangling off one ear or something like that. It was good. One other thing that we did notice when we got to code orange was that the cab drivers would take only limited numbers of people in the taxis, and everyone had to sit in the back seat. So there was no more of this piling 4 or 5 people into a cab. Most of them were okay with 3 people, providing we could get into the back seat. That may be because I was traveling with my 86-year-old mother, and they realized she kind of needed help just getting around. But yeah, we felt very safe when we were down there. I'd happily have no problem with returning with the current circumstances.
That's a good point.
How has orange affected the Colectivos?
They're still driving. They're using bigger ones now. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, Keith and Kim, but they're using like the bus size ones now, which is kind of irritating to me because they pass the corner outside my house and I can see them now. I like the smaller, low profile one. Maybe that's in an effort to have a larger vehicle and spread people out. I'm not sure, but that's the only thing I've really noticed in the last couple of months. They've started using the bigger bus style again, but they're running all the time.
We're in Puerto Morelos right now, and honestly, just feel like more people are piling in the Colectivos, the larger ones.
Yeah, big ones.
Yes, more people.
I have a question. I joined late, so please forgive me if this has already been asked or spoken about. How is inventory?
Oh, I should have started with that because it's not good. There's not much inventory in Puerto Morelos.
That's what I've noticed, but I thought that I would ask, you know, with you being on the ground, so to speak. So does it move quickly? Is it few and far between? Is it the kind of thing where, you know, I'm in Mexico now. If I were to go door to door and ask somebody if they wanted to sell, you know, does that kind of thing still happen? So maybe you can share on inventory, please.
Well, so, you know, there's been kind of a run on Puerto Morelos real estate for about 1.5 years. And there's not much left. There are building new projects. Selva Escondida's, you know, added a bunch of inventory. But certainly on the port side, there's very little inventory, especially already built. There are some pre-construction projects here, and I don't know the status of those. We don't sell those, but there's like no condos on the market right now in the Seaside Village, which is very strange. And I think like 2 homes. So there is some inventory left in the gated communities of Punta Reina, Punta Vista, the aldeas going up the highway. And there's off and on inventory in the Colonia, which, so I mean, the overall issue, Lisa, is that we don't have an MLS. I probably should start there too. There's no multi-list system, so there's no way for us to know everything that's on the market at any given time. And it's very common here for people to kind of throw out a for sale sign just to see what happens when they don't even really intend to sell their property.
Exactly, yeah.
And I would not go door to door knocking on people's doors because you don't know if they own the property. And it's, I mean, it's where you need someone who's a professional to, you know, vet the property, make sure the person you're talking to is the actual owner, make sure it is even in a legal position to be sold. So I don't think that's the best way to try to find properties for sale. You know, we are aware of we have our own like agent groups where we have kind of an MLS. There's a Point Two Homes, which is a website which has listings here, although you have to be very careful there because no one's controlling that. So everyone is posting on there at every different price point, whether they have a relationship with the seller or not. So you have to be a little careful about that, but it's a tool that you can use. So yeah, so at this point, it's definitely a seller's market in Puerto Morelos. There's just not much inventory and there's a ton of interest. When you asked how quickly things were moving, we used to have a pretty slow moving market, especially compared to the US and Canada. And it would not be unusual to see properties sit on the market for at least 1 year and usually more because it's seasonal, right? We only have people here a few months a year who are interested in buying. That's kind of all changed in the last almost 3 years. We've become a year-round market and people are buying online. They're buying by doing virtual showings and buying without coming. Not usually they've been here and they're aware of, you know, they've been in the neighborhoods and stuff. And so It's not something I'm super comfortable with, but that's happening too. So things are moving much quicker. And many times they're moving before they make it to the market. We list it, we talk about it, we talk about it in our social media, and then we have people look and we don't even have time to get the pictures. So it's kind of a crazy situation that we're not used to. So I can't tell you, I mean, I think the best thing to do would be to, talk with an agent, talk about what your price point is, what you're looking for, and then have them try to dig it up for you. And keep your eye on the market.
Thank you.
I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Good
good.
to see you. Hey.
You too.
Jennifer. Nice to see everybody. So this has been so informative, and I guess I don't really have a question, but I have a concern.
Okay.
And not only are we going to be new, hopefully, new property owners in Mexico, having never owned in Mexico before, but we're also going to be rent our place out. So there's a learning curve with that as well. So I was just wondering maybe if you could fill me in a little bit on maybe perhaps having some kind of a Zoom in the future where there's somebody we can ask questions about that, or if there are any resources to help us as, not understanding the whole process of property management, that we can ask questions about that.
Sure. Have you seen we have a Puerto Morelos buyers brainstorming guide. I don't know if you've seen that.
Okay.
Where hopefully we provided it to you. If not, I will send it to you.
We have that, yes.
Oh, you do? And so we do talk in there about what the property manager does and and rental. But yeah, for sure, let's see if we can, we've done them before about how to maintain your property and renting. So yeah, we'll do one more in depth on that. And also please tune in when Millie gets here, because one of the questions is, do you have to report your rental income in Mexico? And I think that it kind of correlates with the immigration, and I think she has some information on that. So I will, the official line is, of course, you're supposed to pay taxes on rental income. But the reality is, I don't know anyone doing that in Mexico. So, and most people aren't paying taxes on it here or in the US or Canada. So things may be changing, about with that. But yes, I'm putting that down on my list.
So we rented ours, Kim, for the first couple years, 5-7 years ago. We rented our house for the first 5 years or so. These last 5 we have not. We were on Airbnb. We didn't have to report anything. Of course, our CPA knew we bought the house and we were, everything, we were up and up, and we just filed a report with the United States government telling them that we own this home in Mexico. But in the last couple of years, Airbnb has actually been generating tax reports. So they are advising the US government of the income that you're receiving. So I think things are changing, Kim, to your point. And I think that that's something you would want to look into with the rental agency you're going to use, if that's the route you're going to go, a VRBO or Airbnb or whatever, and they can tell you what those implications are.
Yeah, for sure. Airbnb and VRBO are also collecting Mexico imposed, they're requiring you to pay their hotel tax. Because the hotels are very upset about Airbnb and VRBO. So they are collecting that on your behalf and reporting it. So probably it's not much longer that we can just continue to hide all of this income, I think, unfortunately.
Can I just ask a quick question? Sure. It's more about living there than purchasing.
Yes.
As far as like banking goes, I was just curious to know, can a foreign person or open a bank account in Mexico, or what's the best bet for banking when you're down there? I know it's easy when you're going for a specific length of time, you can sort of guess how much you need to bring with you, but if you're living down there, what's generally the best bet?
Well, so you have ATMs. So a lot of people don't open an account here. They just they use ATMs or they bring cash. Now that we didn't have a bank for a long time. So now we have two banks in town.
Yes.
CI Banco, which is next to the Chedraui on the highway, and BBVA, which is a little bit north also on the highway. And so you can open an account at either one of those banks as a foreigner. BBVA, you have to have some kind of a resident visa, either temporary or permanent, and CI Banco you can open with a tourist visa. And they're both, I have an account at both of them actually. And I mean, I live here and I pay tax, you know, I have income in Mexico, and so I need to have a bank here. But I lived here for a few years I just had Wells Fargo in the US, and I just took everything out of the ATM. So I know a lot of people do that. It's just up to you what you want to deal with. One thing I will tell you is for American citizens, and I'm not sure about Canadian citizens, if you have a foreign bank account, you have to be aware that if you ever have more than the equivalent of 10,000 US dollars in the account, it triggers a reporting requirement. Not a tax, but a reporting requirement with hefty fines if you don't disclose that you have that. So if you have like a lot of people are going to build properties, they're going to build houses, you want to watch the level in your bank account. And if you go over 10,000, the equivalent of 10,000, you need to just disclose that at the end when you file your taxes at the end of the year.
Good.
So.
Thank you very much.
Caroline, do you and John have a? Okay.
Yeah, we have, we're with CI Banco, but I also have a Schwab investment and bank account. So I have that real online flexibility of a major bank that I can get access to funds. We just did a remodeling and I needed a whole bunch of cash, and you can only hand carry 10 grand per person in. So that wasn't going to cut it for a remodel. And also think about if you're going to buy a vehicle or something, you're going to need more cash. So for us, the ATM just wasn't going to cut it anymore. So we've have the bank accounts, and we're able to transfer money into our own bank accounts. That's how we do it.
Keith,
Thank you.
Your BBVA. Oh, you're off.
Sorry. My internet connection's a little wobbly this evening, so you cut out, so I couldn't hear everything you said about the bank, but we have accounts at BBVA that requires the residency of some sort. CI Banco, you can open an account on a tourist visa. We looked into that when we first moved here, so it is a possibility there. At the time that we moved here, they wanted 30,000 pesos minimum deposit to open the account, but they will do it for you. And then I wanted to say too, that if you're just going to do the ATMs and get your money that way from your accounts in either United States or Canada, there's a couple of different ways to do it where you can save on some transaction fees in the US. I'm not sure about Canada, but you could look into it. In the US, Charles Schwab has an account, has no international transaction fees or withdrawal fees at ATMs. And Capital One has one now also, and I can't remember what it's called. It's something 360 or 360 something. But Charles Schwab and Capital One are both things that you could look into. They might have similar services available in Canada. And then the other thing I want to say too is if you're here in Puerto Morelos, when you are here, if you're using the ATMs here just to withdraw cash, make sure you talk to people and find out which are the best ATMs to use, because I think there's some definite opinions that some are safer than others. I keep seeing this post or different posts on the Facebook groups right now about one of the banks, and I can't remember which one it is, and I don't want to speculate because I don't want to slander them if I get the wrong name. But there's one bank in town that keeps taking people's ATM cards. They put the ATM card to get the cash and it won't give them their card back. So I think for sure the ones at the actual banks, either BBVA and their ATM lobby, or the one right next to CI Banco, right next to the Chedraui on the Colonia side, or the ones in the Chedraui on the port side, are probably safe bets. So I think you can do it either way. You can have an account down here where you're going to move money down, or you can just, use the ATMs to draw from your accounts in the US and Canada. But just talk to folks and just kind of get an idea about where you might want to withdraw those funds.
So one more caveat, Lee, about the Charles Schwab, which I totally love my bank with Charles Schwab. They do a great job. In terms of fees, So I have a couple of banks in New Mexico, which is where we came from 10 years ago. And I have a couple banks there, and they require, both of my New Mexico banks require that I actually walk in physically in person to initiate an international transfer. And so that was okay for the first couple of years because we were ATMing it, like, we're talking about on this call. But then, when you need to buy something like a car, or you need a lot of money, ATMs are limited. You can only get like 5,000 pesos a day. So you got to every day go and get 5,000 pesos until you make your, enough money. And that's a pain in the tush. So with Charles Schwab, you can transfer from my New Mexico banks into Charles Schwab for free. And then Charles Schwab will do an international transfer to my bank here in Mexico for $14. So that's really great, really easy.
One of the questions we have when it comes to banking is the logistics, because there's going to be utilities to pay when we're not there. There's going to be condo fees to pay or residents association fees to pay. There's going to be, if we have a property manager that's looking at the place and keeping an eye on it, which we're probably going to want to have some degree of person keeping an eye on it. There's paying them. There's insurance. I guess you pay your insurance annually when you first get it, but there's all of those things. And I'm thinking, how do you set that up logistically? So if we can have someone that on one of these things that actually maybe is in a condo that talks about how do you make this work? Because it's all, no pun intended, foreign to us.
A lot of this stuff you can pay online just like you do at home, and especially now, when we first got here, that wasn't the case, but now a lot of it can be done online. But there are a few things that you have to pay in person. I'm thinking of Awakan, the water has to be paid in person, and your manager as well. There are a variety of options for how to pay people down here. It's so easy now with all the transfer systems and stuff like that, but even a prepaid Visa card and stuff you can recharge. There's just some simple ways to do that, to get money down here to someone who might be working for you, Gardner, whomever.
Caroline, Aguacon can be paid online now too. I pay mine online every month. Yeah.
Well, it takes John a few months to catch up with the new technology. So
Rhonda, the electric bill and the water bill, you can pay both of those online. I think also down here, we use PayPal. I do anyway. I use PayPal a lot more here in Mexico than I ever did in the United States. So there's some different things that you can pay with PayPal. And then if you have a property manager, I think it's always an option too, to leave one of your credit cards with them. If there's going to be things that they need to pay for on your behalf here, that you think you won't be able to pay in any other way, then, someone that you have a trustworthy relationship with, and they can act as your agent here and pay some of those bills also. But I think you'll find a lot of the stuff can just be handled online. And I'm almost positive even the condo fees in your situation, or your HOA fees, monthly fees, I think are paid through an app also. So I think you guys are going to be in pretty good shape.
We're lucky that we have all this fancy stuff. When I moved, well, my mom came here a long time ago and stayed. It's a long story, but we were buying the bookstore in 2001. That fell apart. But back then, everyone was bringing cash. You were just carrying cash from the US. And that was a little scary. And then stashing it, for 6 months or however long you were going to be here. So it's much better now. We have ATMs and wire transferring and this WISE, which we'll probably, we'll do some more meetings and talk about what do you do when you move in? Here's how you're going to handle your banking. Here's how your transfers are going to work and all that. We'll do that over the course of these Runaway Wednesdays. And we'd love to hear from you about what other topics you would like to cover. We, typically do how to maintain your house in the tropics. We'll do, which will go into the property management as well.
How do you maintain your house in the tropics?
Constantly. You constantly maintain it. Very different from Colorado maintenance, home maintenance, but
Rust-Oleum, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, WD-40. But yeah, I mean, you know, we just want you to, we wanted to make it not so scary and remind you that it's an adventure. You're gonna, I mean, if you're really considering a move here, it's a new life and it's a wonderful place to live. And we want you to have all the information to feel confident about your decision. So let us know what you're interested in, and we'll be back on the 16th for the immigration talk. I'm going to drop the link so you can get the Puerto Morelos buyer brainstorming guide. It'll be in our group. That might be helpful for you. And of course, we have a ton of information on the website as well. And we will keep chatting about this. All right, thank you guys so much. Next time you have to talk more, please. I'll have cocktails.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Have a good night.